Hello world, welcome to PaNZIT. I'm Michael Calisto here, coming to you from Wellington, New Zealand, and welcome to our 10th episode of PaNZIT, the podcast. Yeah, so thank you so much for listening, and don't forget to subscribe so that you get updated episode every time we upload new episodes. Today, Joseph and I will talk to my personal friend, George Go, out of Singapore. George is the global staff for Cloudnative architecture from VMware. But of course, we will give him a chance to introduce himself later. So, by the way, hello, Joseph. Batiin mo naman yung viewers natin.
Yes, hello to all our not really televiewers, but podcast listeners and viewers out there, wherever part of the world you are in right now. Hope you are keeping safe. And I think, Mike, it's different when you're having fun. So we didn't realize that it's our 10th episode already because we just enjoyed it, right? And speaking of fun, I think this is going to be another fun episode because we have a fun guest. So it's not only fun, it's going to be entertaining and for sure a lot of learning. So I'm looking forward to our chat with George.
Yeah. So how are you, George? You know, how is Singapore? New Zealand and Australia has opened the borders. Actually, there are a lot of people that are flying in and out. I'm actually in a hotel right now, if you notice the settings, because this is my first actually business trip of 2021. I know you are jealous, George. So how are you today?
I'm so jealous. I wish that was like a fake background, but it is indeed real. And what's a hotel? I don't know what a hotel is anymore.
You totally forgot about it already.
Yeah. Anyway, so how are you, and how's Singapore today?
Well, I think overall, Singapore's got it controlled pretty well. Our community transmission cases have been pretty low, and I think people are mature and aware of what they need to do to stay healthy, keep healthy, and to keep others safe as well. In terms of the vaccine, I think the vaccine rollout has been pretty organized so far. Ages 45 and up are the next group. My parents have got either one or two jabs already, so I'm pleased with that. And for myself, I'm not going to reveal my age, but I haven't got my jabs yet.
We don't mind though. But speaking of age and getting to know each other better, I think it's just nice for you to have an introduction. The things that you do, probably things that excite you after COVID, because we were just chatting about that train trip, is it? So hopefully you can tell us a bit about yourself, what you do, and the things that you make you relaxed outside of work. So.
Oh yeah. Well, maybe I'll start off with my day job, right? I'm a global staff cloud-native architect at VMware. It's a mouthful, but really it's about helping ourselves, helping our partners to gain better adoption and better usage of cloud-native platforms. Yep. And of course, that's underpinned by Kubernetes itself. But the landscape today is so much more than Kubernetes. It's about how do we navigate from that platform to something that works for the organization.
Right, that's right.
So that's what I do for my day job. I call it a day job, but I have a lot of night calls, and I work mostly at night. I have calls with my colleagues around the world. That's always a fun thing. Instead of traveling, I talk to people around the world.
Yep.
And work on different projects. Things like today it could be building content to work with the wider professional services organization in VMware, right? Because they've traditionally been working with one set of products, or rather a portfolio of products. And hey, how do we bring Kubernetes, how do we bring cloud native into the mix? So
Oh, that's
That's
quite
a,
cool.
that's a
Yeah, that sounds busy. What keeps you relaxed then, outside of all those nights, sleepless nights?
I think what keeps me relaxed is uh, I have a dog, so
Ooh.
um,
Yeah.
walking her. Sometimes it's not so relaxed, but most of the time, it's just going out for a walk, clearing your mind, and
Yeah.
being able to think about something else for once and observing the world as it is.
Yeah.
Oh, that's always
So,
good.
yeah. Mm.
Oh,
So, so you.
I just bought a bicycle, so I'm gonna start cycling.
Oh
Um,
wow. Okay.
Yeah, that would be nice. Mike also
Yeah.
does a lot of biking, and I'm also planning to get one as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's actually this product that you can virtually bike
Correct.
together.
Correct.
Yeah. So maybe we should do that sometimes.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, so you mentioned Kubernetes, my favorite topic, Joseph's favorite topic, and your favorite topic, and we know that it's already a clear winner when it comes to the space of
Mhm.
orchestration platform, right? And other might correct us on that, but I think three of us agree, because of course it has an advanced ability to handle wide range of workload, at scale, multi-tenant ability, and of course it's open source in nature. So if I peek into your George crystal ball, what do you think
Ooh.
are the next big steps or big things that this technology will take us?
well, I think it's not no surprise what you hear from me, right?
Yeah.
Because from what we've seen over the past few years, it's becoming a substrate for enterprise software, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And I see it as an operating system.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because if you've got all the constructs of an operating system,
Mhm.
you've got daemon sets, you've got cron jobs,
Mm.
so on and so forth, all the mechanisms that help you to operate so that your software runs on top
Yes.
of that operating system.
Mm.
It's first come into general users like web and data science, and telco, HPC, and so on and so forth. So it's really if there's not an OS, I don't know how better to put it.
Yeah.
The next steps, well, from what I see today, observability is a big thing. How do you evaluate, react, and especially preempt problems, when they arise. So, looking into what we have in a community, that landscape, I think is growing bigger and bigger.
Right.
Prometheus, Grafana,
Mhm.
Elastic, they all have their part to play. It's been so many years, but there's still so much more that we can go to
Yes.
learn how to use it and deploy it at scale. So I think that's a big part of what's coming in the future. The tools, learning how to use it effectively. And of course, the other thing is DevOps, right? Everybody talks about DevOps. But it's not just about your technology. It's about
The
how
way you use it. Yeah.
it's how you use it.
Yeah.
It's how do you apply technology to your organization, right? Because hey, you've got great deployment capabilities, but how does it fit your business?
That's definitely true. And speaking of how it fits into the business, and thank you for helping us have a peek on your crystal ball. What do you think is the main? What are the main reasons why some organizations are actually holding back onto like test, not even just adopting it quickly, but also like testing it and going into it? Especially, you mentioned it's now becoming as fundamental as an operating system. What's holding them back? I think.
So I've been in a startup situation, and I've been in a enterprise situation with customers. So the big difference is, in a startup, you start small, run fast, break things,
Yeah.
That's
and
right.
pick yourself up again.
Correct.
I'm not saying you can't do that in the enterprise, but there's always consequences you need to worry about. At least to your shareholders, but also to regulations. Right?
True.
How do you? And I'm not just talking about Kubernetes. I'm talking about any piece of new
Yep.
Yes.
technology. To adopt it, you need to make sure that your guys are ready to run it. And that means, is it secure enough? Does it fit into the government's regulations where you intend to run it?
Correct.
And most importantly, you can be smart enough to build it, but are you smart enough to fix and debug it?
That's right.
I faced that problem so many times when I was writing code. I still face it today, right? To hold myself back and hey, let's try to be clear on our intent rather than be smart and save few lines of code. So I think getting that muscle memory and getting that I don't know, wisdom, what to do in certain situations, that would be the primary thing that is missing. So
getting the mindset. That's really good.
So you touched something there, George, that actually interests me. As the question whether an industry or like us, of course, maybe an FSI industry is ready to adopt Kubernetes because, of course, supportability. Do they have the right workloads to do it? But there are other also examples that actually they've adopted it successfully, but I think they cannot articulate how successful are their implementation. Maybe because you mentioned about the observability, or they didn't really measure the key metrics. The 4 key metrics. I think the DORA metrics is a good example. So do you think in the future there will be some focus on this so that we can encourage more adoption of Kubernetes? Is that something that you see? Going back to your crystal ball again.
I think, or rather, I have friends who are working in some established FSIs who have been on that cloud native journey for years, right?
Yes.
And that's not even Kubernetes. It's public cloud. It's your new paradigms of, well, it may not be new to many, but infrastructure as code. Everything is a service. So I know some organizations have been successful at this, and the reason they've been successful is because they took the hard way. They built their own skills. Maybe they brought in vendors at very strategic points, but most of the time it was a bootstrap effort to really build the expertise in-house, because who really understands your use case but you yourself as an organization?
True.
That's really right. And let's just dwell a little further technically on Kubernetes. Let's talk about the numbers, right? And I think the recent release of Kubernetes, which is 1.21, has about 13 enhancements, and I think they've all graduated to stable now. So 16 enhancements are moving to beta, 20 enhancements are entering alpha, and 2 features have been deprecated. So I just want to take your thoughts on the recent Kubernetes release. What do you think about it?
So I know the numbers. I shared it on my social network. But to be honest, aside from the headlines, well, the headlines is pod security policy is deprecated.
That's right.
That's a headline.
In 1.25, right? And other than that, it's been kind of boring, right?
Oh.
And I think that's a good thing.
Yep.
Mhm.
As a substrate,
Mm.
as an operating system,
Mhm.
I don't think it speaks to how mature you are
Mature.
if
And
That's right. Exactly.
things are exciting
right.
all the time.
and there's
Right.
not a dramatic change all of a sudden because it's stable enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
And the other thing is again, it's not technical, it's process. It's
Mm.
the process of beta releases, or sorry, of beta features, right? You know, it's if you look at one of the earlier blog posts from 2020, there was talk on, hey, how do we migrate beta stuff, right?
Mhm.
So that you avoid a permanent beta.
Yeah.
And you guys know this, you've played with Kubernetes, OpenShift for a while. Hey, why was Ingress beta since 2015 up to, you know, like last year or something? But it's really stable. It's useful and it works. This is something that will push the stability of Kubernetes moving forward, right?
Correct.
Either move it to stable
Yep.
maturity, or make a change that will make it stable eventually.
Yeah.
I
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and
True.
and I like what you said there. That you know, I think it also a good testimony that the more people are using the Kubernetes itself and the components around it, the better the maturity journey will be, because there'll be more people looking at the code, contributing to it, and getting that feedback loop to make it stable in the future. Now, another topic that I actually want to talk to you, and we've had some private conversation about this, is the serverless. So, you know, serverless is another features that has been there for quite some times, and we've seen this implemented in public cloud. You know, the famous Lambda, Azure Function, and so on. So in Kubernetes implementation, what are the usual use cases that you see in the field, and what are the challenges that you see preventing, you know, the phase 2 or phase 3 of adapting into, you know, the serverless that is defined by CNCF in your perspective?
So serverless has popped up once in my conversations with customers.
Okay.
So I think a lot of the folks I talk to, they're still in the, hey, Kubernetes, how do we adopt it?
Right.
Whereas serverless is something that's on the radar. But you know, let's get this Kubernetes thing sorted out first.
Yeah.
Your experience may be different. You know, we're in different countries after all. But I do think that today, I myself, I'm still learning about serverless, right? I know it's actually very nice for event-based architectures, which is a lot of, applies to so many things today, right? Processing pipelines, stream processing,
There you go.
web and mobile backends, right? So it applies to so many things. But I've been looking at some of the challenges. One of the things that popped up was cold starts, right? Which affects your response in the first response, and so on. So how do you solve for that? And then you've got orchestration of your serverless functions. How do you orchestrate multiple functions together? How do you do authentication and authorization between services? And then you start to think, hey, maybe we could use a framework around that.
Yeah.
That and then you start to think, you know, what do I really get out of this?
Okay.
Do I get a lot of savings, or you know, Kubernetes has been there. It's solved a large part of those problems. Does it help to fit in to the serverless sort of paradigm? Maybe there's a middle ground. But you know, in enterprises, there's gonna be a mix of everything. There's gonna be serverless. There's gonna be containers. There's gonna be VMs, bare metal, and mainframes. So long answer short, I think serverless will be useful. I think it needs to mature a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair enough, and I think that
maturity.
observation is the same to what I see. There's a lot of interest. There's a lot of POC and testing about the event-driven architecture. Not only handling functions, but the ability to scale down to zero and scale up at any time. Actually intrigues industries and FSI especially, because of the of the economic benefits when it comes to upfront compute resource investment and so on. So I think that's where serverless stories are. And I mean, if you look at it, Lambda, there are already implementation of serverless, and I think I call that implementation of serverless phase 0. So really looking at functions, but moving forward, it needs to include containers and other type of workloads as well.
Like how do you go beyond a function, right? What are the design patterns and language you use to build something that's large? The examples I've seen so far are, this is a single processing pipeline, and how you react to events. You can compose multiple services together, which reminds me of microservices, right? So I think it's all down to your design and what you need.
Of course, yeah. And I think when we talk about serverless, we need to talk about service mesh as well, because the workload of serverless needs to be within the mesh, so that you can actually implement a logic like circuit breaker and so on. But we are diving into the deep of the weeds of this, George.
I know there's a lot more to talk about serverless, but
exactly.
it's also nice to talk about other things. Like one thing that's out there also as well is hybrid cloud, George. Just wanted to know and get your take on, what do you think are the challenges that you see prevent industry from embracing hybrid cloud, especially working for VMware?
That's an interesting question. Why? Because the definition of hybrid cloud has changed so much. It used to be all about cloud bursting.
Correct.
And today you hardly hear about cloud bursting. You hear about mixed mode. Hybrid cloud, where mixed mode is, I'm going to host many things in public cloud, because hey, things like containers, things like serverless, have made it very cost efficient for me to do certain things, right? Static websites or static artifacts, and distributing content globally. And then we think about the enterprise/government types of data classification, which there's a bit more challenge in bringing things to the public. So then you get that local data center, or even in the airline industry, where you may get a leased line connection to hotel and reservations bookings instead of through the internet. So I think public cloud definitely is the way to go.
Yep.
And even saying that, I think there will always be some portion that's going to be on-prem.
Correct.
Right?
Another interesting technology that I want to talk about and I want to take your opinion is, edge computing.
Edge computing.
I think edge computing is something that has been floating around for years, and there are, some sort of like exploration that happened years ago about edge computing. So, do you think this is going to be adopted by industries, not only by telcos, but by the likes of FSI as well? And what do you think are the challenges that you see on edge computing right now?
So, I think that edge computing is interesting, especially for Kubernetes, because Kubernetes gives you a way to deploy things in a standardized way.
That's right. Yeah.
And if you bring it to the edge, that gives you use in very powerful use cases, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Things that you can't go over the cloud, right? Think of things like your car. What's your braking distance, and how many fractions of a second do you need to react to an impending event? Can you go over the cloud for that? No. So having something in the car itself, it doesn't have to be deployed like 15 times, 100 times a day. But imagine, I don't have numbers off the top of my head, but every year we hear so much about firmware updates that go in cars that maybe they mess around with the fuel air mixture that violate some sort of emissions things, and then there's brake failures because of certain updates. So imagine, instead of bringing your car back to the dealer who may or may not have the time to do that for you, imagine it going as an over-the-air update, just like your mobile phone to your car.
Absolutely,
and it's deployed. So it's an interesting use case in that sense. I'm not saying that everybody will do it the way that I've described, but I can imagine it being deployed that way. Simply because, hey, it's you need a super quick response time to do that. And the other things would be places where you don't get great connections.
It's gonna be tough.
Board ships, that kind of thing. I would see those as interesting opportunities for edge computing use cases, especially for Kubernetes deployments in that sense.
So I would like to follow up on that, because you mentioned high latency can be a problem. It needs to be autonomous because, of course, it needs to make a right decision whether the data can be processed at the edge or needs to be sent to the data center for processing and then serving later on. And I think that is something that is interesting to solve. And do you think it needs to be a Kubernetes solution, so it can be a VM as well at the far edge, if you look at it?
Absolutely. I think the eventual solution will depend on the cost of the raw materials.
That's right.
And how large scale do you want it to be? If it's going to be in every car, maybe containers might be better because they're more lightweight. If it's, let's say, in a bunch of oil rigs around the world, right? That's a different scale, and you deal with a different scale of inputs and outputs as well. Maybe containers can do it. Maybe VMs It might also depend on how you get your software. Is it from a vendor who
Yeah,
supplies
true.
GPUs,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
um, Sometimes it's never that straightforward when you're dealing with legacy stuff in the enterprise.
Yeah.
True.
You know,
Yeah. So yeah, that's interesting, and I think there is no right or wrong answer
Uh-huh.
there. And I think people smarter than us are still thinking how to do that. When it comes to say for example storage and security, and but the emergence of the ARM, like the Raspberry Pi, actually is another way of looking at it, because I can think of, say, for example, a bank. They already have investment on their ATM locations. So that ATM locations has the proper plugging of plumbing of network. So that can be act as listening post,
Mhm.
so that it can be used to move data
Yeah,
from
that's a
a
good point.
location to a
Mhm.
central
Yeah.
location. But this is very intriguing, and
Uh-huh.
I've been interested in this, and actually been writing article about this, George. Yeah. So this I think the solution for when it comes to edge can be containers, or plus Kubernetes, or can be just a simple VM deployment.
what would you think goes into an ATM for IoT
That's all.
Mhm.
monitoring?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you think about it, ATM is not only the money transactions where numbers, small data. They actually put cameras as well. So these cameras can, that has a bigger packet that needs to be sent out to some locations. So yeah, it's an interesting one. So moving to VMware, let's talk about the VMware and your job specifically, because VMware and Red Hat, where I work, are partners, right? And the companies are both contributing to Kubernetes upstream, so that it can, you touch this. We need to move those beta capabilities to become
Mhm.
stable, right?
Yep.
So and the likes of Google, so it's a very healthy upstream community. What do you think are the exciting features
Mhm.
that you can share to our listeners? The things that
Upcoming. Yeah.
my interest right now is Cilium. The network Kubernetes solution. Do you have other VMware specific contribution that you can share to us, or just any upstream specific that you are excited the most?
So it's interesting you mentioned networking. Um,
Mhm.
there's the IPv6, IPv4
Yes.
stack in the latest release, right?
Yeah.
I'll be very interested to see how that works out, especially for
Uh-huh.
IoT use cases.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. That's really interesting. That's right.
Yeah, and how does it affect the netting of clusters, the
Mm.
interconnectivity of even edge use cases, right?
Yeah.
Um, it's in my head, it brings around a lot of possibilities.
Mhm.
Yeah.
How do you interconnect them? How do you secure
Mm.
these networks
Mm.
with IPv6? I don't know. I'm a IPv6 novice.
Yeah.
Um, it'll be an interesting learning journey. In fact,
Uh-huh.
um, learning Kubernetes has reinforced so much of my Linux knowledge.
Uh-huh.
True. Very, very true. Yeah.
It's it's an amazing project.
Containers are Linux, as they say.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, Mike already alluded into this, George. But in the tech industry right now, it's not very uncommon to be competitors and partners
Mm.
at the same time. Just
Mm.
like who we are right now. So George is
Mm.
from VMware, Mike and Joseph is from Reda, and we're friends and we're partners. And at the same time, there's a healthy competition going on
Mm.
between our companies. And since you have been on both worlds, I think. What do you think are the
Yeah.
similarities and the differences of having worked for both or different vendors to that effect?
I think there's, at least for the team that I've joined, there's actually a large overlap of cultures and practices in terms of how do we build software more effectively for our customers. And there's, at least I don't find any silos in terms of, hey, can I look at the source code for what we do for TKG, which is VMware's distribution of Kubernetes. The code is in a GitHub private organization. I can go in there, look at the code, file an issue, and ask for changes. Right. That's an internal process. There's also the external process, which the external project, I should say, which VMware drives, which is Cluster API.
Yes.
Cluster API underpins the TKG product. So it feels like I'm working with the same people and practices, but different company. And I appreciate that. And I'm grateful for that. I mean, just being on this call with you guys, I know that if we actually get to work together on some code, for the betterment of the community, that will not be an automatic, no, George, you cannot do that. I think that's a great liberty and freedom.
And I think that's the way open source drive this culture, and not only open source, but human psychology. We humans, when we if we want to improve, we need to touch each other's skill sets and collaborate and help to the betterment of our community. And that's really good to hear that you're happy working where you are, George, and we can talk about things like this.
That's so true. And as we all know, as we always say, collaboration leads to innovation. And even if you're working for different companies and whatnot, we can all be friends and work together towards innovating for a better world, if I must say. Well, on that note, George, we're really glad to have you on the show, and we will just be really more than happy to see some last few bits of nuggets from you for our listeners out there who wanted to all right, what's my biggest takeaway from George today, based on our conversation? Just last few words, nuggets of wisdom, George, to our listeners.
I don't know if I'm wise enough to give nuggets of wisdom.
Everyone is.
I am going to listen to you attentively,
Correct.
George.
Actually, I was gonna say that there was a new release of TKG recently.
Oh good.
But I like that release because it provides a service type load balancer.
That's good to know.
But I think words of wisdom would be, I think, to make friends.
Yes.
To make friends and to be part of the community as much as you can.
Yes.
And be yourself. And I think through that you can find doing what you love and be productive.
And connecting with like-minded people. There you go. You heard it straight from George. Go, make friends, be connected, and thank you so much, George. That's I think that's really a good piece of nuggets of wisdom, because more than anything else, we are people. We need each other. Collaborate. So on that note, Mike, I would just like to thank George for his time, and thank you to all our listeners out there as well. And I'm sure you've learned a lot from this episode, so make sure you do like, share, and subscribe, and share it to your friends, just like what George said.
Awesome.
Make friends, share this episode to everyone. All right. On that
Thanks,
note,
George.
thanks, man. Have a good one. Thanks again, George. Bye-bye.
Bye.
You can